Great to have you listening in today. As with previous seasons, it is my hope that the guests and their stories that I get to share with you this season can provide you with the tools and or insights that you need to know that you can make it through whatever is happening for you now. And not only that, that you can have the life you want in whatever way you want that to look like. So let's get to it. I'm your host, Helen Morris, and this is The Beautiful Side of Grief. Are you a hot, emotional mess? I laugh because I remember those times so well. You know, when you just feel everything, your brain goes into overdrive, and when you feel pain, it's naturally intense. And the struggles you face, they just seem to be on another level compared to everybody else. Well, I've got a guest today who I hope is going to help you make sense of all of this and let you know that it doesn't have to be this way. Her name is Jennifer Moore, and she is a multi-award-winning author with her book, Empathic Mastery. She's also an energy healer, an intuitive guide and psychic, a mentor and master trainer for EFT International. And her passion is working with highly sensitive empaths and helping them to move from absorbing the distress of the world to using their unique gifts to thrive. No stranger to loss and grief, in May of 2020, Jen's father died from COVID after years of decline from dementia. Now, this served as an invitation for her to redefine her priorities and boundaries. And I love that because that's exactly what happened to me. It also allowed Jen to understand the interrelationship between life and death, and also to recognize that relationships do not necessarily end with someone's passing. So the intention I'm setting for this episode is for us to understand just what empaths are, why they feel so much, what is the purpose behind that, and how this can affect your very own grief journey. Before we get into it, I'm sending loads of love, hope, and healing your way, and also my heartfelt thanks for you listening in today. So, Jen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the beautiful side of grief. Nice to have you with us.
Oh, Helen. Yeah, she's just like so there.
I know, she's wanting the thanks as well.
Yeah, she really is. She's like, yeah, I set this up, Mom.
Yeah. And,
Helen,
right from the outset, let's just discuss that because
she's like right in the forefront here. Yeah. So Helen, Thank you. Helen and Tull, thank you so much for having me. It is such an absolute honor to be here.
An absolute pleasure to have you. And I'm a great believer that what I'm doing is divinely guided by my beautiful girl, Tal. She just opens and sends me invitations to interview the most incredible people. And so, I'm excited to be talking about being empathic with you, Jen, and all the ins and outs of that, as well as the beautiful connection you have with your dad. So,
yes.
Yeah. So you yourself spent the first 30 years of your life struggling to control fear and emotional overwhelm, didn't you?
Yeah, I would even say 30 is a conservative number. That, the first 30 years of my life, I was very emotional. I was very sensitive. I was constantly being told that I was too sensitive, that I was overreacting, that I was taking things too personally, that I just needed to develop a tougher skin, that I needed to just kind of ignore it, suck it up, get over it, stop worrying so much. And the problem was that all of maybe these solutions work for certain kinds of people, but for me, it was like, it just didn't compute. It was like people were speaking like a foreign language to me that I just didn't understand. And so all I could conclude from that was that there was something very wrong with me and that I was broken, that I needed to be better, that I needed to be a different person than I was, and that if I could just sort of like fix myself, that life would be better, life would be easier. And it wasn't until I started to do some personal. So for me, basically, one of the coping tools that I turned to fairly early in my life was sugar, because sugar is a funny thing. In the short term, it can bring you a great deal of relief. In the long term, it has a tendency to exacerbate all of the anxiety and the depression and the things that were not helping me at all. But it also was, it basically became sort of the agent of change for me that allowed me to really say yes to my own healing and my own recovery and my own journey towards something better. So for that, sugar really did what it was supposed to do, because it wasn't working. It was, I had gotten sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was very, very fortunate to find people who basically said, sugar is a drug. This is affecting you really strongly. You need to abstain from it. And my weight had been affected by it too. I had a lot of body distortion and body dysmorphia. And so I was engaging in eating disordered behavior. And so when I started to address what I thought was just my weight and my food issues, it led me much deeper. And it was the thing that led me to working with a spectacular therapist in my late 20s who was very sensitive and intuitive, and was the first person ever who started to talk to me about every time I would start feeling out of sorts and I would feel weird, how frequently it was after I had been around another person, or I had been in a situation. And so she started to help me unpack this and recognize that more often than not, I had absorbed and taken on the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensations from somebody else or from a situation that I was in. And that I was processing this stuff as if it was mine, but it was not actually, at least not actually all mine. Some of it, I will say, was, but a lot of it was not. And that ability to start going, wait a second, maybe I really am more sensitive than the average bear. Maybe I am picking up more stuff than other people are picking up. And that means that the way I relate to the world is somewhat different, but I also need different solutions than ordinary people have. So that's kind of starts with my story of being a hot mess, or at least a former hot mess.
And I love that we're talking about this here and now, because what you were saying was so much my very own experience.
I could see you.
I would walk into a room when I was very, very little and know something was off. Yeah. And I would say, what's wrong? And everybody would just gloss over it and pretend, well, there's nothing wrong. And yet I could feel their energy. But it took me years and years and years until I was in my 40s before somebody actually connected the dots for me. And I was well into my own healing journey by that stage as well. Yeah. And I think, and many people don't realize this, it's about 20 to 25% of the population, I think, who are empathic. And many don't even to this day realize that they are in that mix. Right. And I want to stress that, because quite often what you feel is all those things you described. What's wrong with me? Why am I not fitting in? Why is the issue always with me and how I'm processing this? Yet it's not at all. It's just that you just are incredibly highly sensitive and you're picking up on so much. So let's now chat about why? Why do we need people like us? What's the purpose of being empathic?
So And I'll also say, before we go into that, I just want to say that in my experience, there is absolutely a spectrum where, and that there's sort of a spectrum of people who are empathic. And then there are what I call empaths, where there are those of us who are often not just empathic in the sense of we can sense things and pick things up and we're sensitive, but a lot of times empaths tend to be even more on the extreme where they can be picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energies, the sensations from the world around them. But not just from people, but from like the plants, the trees, the animals, from the past, from the future.
Yes. And
that it's definitely a spectrum of extreme, extremity or extremeness with that. And what I've noticed, and I'll just say that what I've noticed is the difference between you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to say it anyway. The difference between somebody who's like intuitive or psychic or has just sort of gifts versus and the ability to pick up on sort of paranormal information, extrasensory perception, is that what I've noticed is that those of us who are empaths process information somatically, mentally, and emotionally as if it's our own. Whereas people with intuition and psychic abilities receive information, but they don't process it as if it's their own. And what I believe, and so this now leads into the why are we like this? First off, I will just say that I believe that, in the same way that some people are born gifted, like some people are basketball players and some people are artists and some people have blue eyes and some people have brown eyes. Some of us are born highly sensitive and empathic. And I think that there is just sort of, it's the luck of the draw, it's the genetics, it just is what it is. But I also really believe that we are, as a species, becoming more and more like this because we are at an evolutionary leap as a species, that we are in the process of evolving to the next level of what we can be. And what I believe is that we've been living, and what I've sort of been told by my guides and spirit, is that we've been living in essentially a lie for nearly 5,000 years since agriculture and the idea of ownership and just the way of seeing things is like, he who dies with the most toys wins. That we've been living with this lie that we are individuals and that we are separate, that we are that we are all like separate entities, that each one of us is like a sole agent on the world on this earth. And what I genuinely have been told, and I believe sincerely, is that the truth is we are part of a substantially larger organism. We are all cells in the body of this earth. And as a result, we are all deeply interconnected. And what I believe is happening right now is that many of us are awakening to our empathic sensitivity, because in order for us to survive as a species on this planet, we absolutely need to be connected. And we also absolutely need to understand the impact of our behavior and how much harm we are causing to ourselves and to the rest of the planet. I believe that the planet is going to keep going. The planet is going to be fine, whether humans are or not. The planet might go through some big shifts and adjustments and may take thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of years to sort of right itself. But the planet is an organism. She'll keep going. She's going to be okay. But as a species, we're at a point where, we're at a crucial point of shift where in order for us to steer in the right direction, we need this feedback. And I believe that it's the empaths on this planet who are feeling things in a way we have almost like a feedback system that is giving us almost immediate response to whether something is a good choice or a bad choice. Like, and I sincerely doubt there were any empaths like in the I don't know who came up with plastic first. So I'm not going to like, say some corporate name that I don't know, but just thinking like, whoever it was, the scientists and the corporations that started making plastic back in like the 1940s and 50s, like if there had been empaths there who were just like, this feels really wrong. I mean, there are so many choices that we've made, especially within the last probably 100 years with the industrialization and going from sort of the industrial age almost to the digital age now, where we have made a lot of choices that have had profound ramifications for the planet. So
Absolutely.
I really believe we are more and more of us are being born into this world right now with this level of sensitivity, because we cannot keep causing the harm as a species that we are causing. And if as more and more of us feel it, it becomes more and more unbearable. And, here in the United States, one of the things that is sadly happening is our country is, I am sure the rest of the world probably thinks we are absolutely insane because of the lack of gun control laws that we have in this country. And we have had so many, like there are just, people value profit over children in this country. And yet what is happening is we are experiencing devastating loss upon devastating loss upon devastating loss. And we are getting to the point where we're hitting the critical mass, where I really believe that the harm and the pain that so many people are feeling about this is going to trump greed and is going to surpass even the strongest NRA lobbyists who are trying to prevent this. Who knew I was going to get on a soapbox talking about gun control? But it's very, very timely in America right now. It's sadly, it's been just crazy what's been going on. But I really do think that it's getting to this fever pitch, and so many people are feeling it. So many empaths are sensing it. Like, so many empaths will feel these things weeks, if not even a month before it happens, and just feel like completely out of sorts and be like, I sense something is coming. And then an event like this happens and it's like, oh, okay, here this thing is. But as more and more people are getting to that place where they're sensitive to it, what I believe is that it gets to the point where it hits the fever pitch, where it's sort of like the fever has to break, that there's just no other choice. There's no other option.
Yes, I strongly believe in what you're saying there, because I think in my own journey, the defining moment for me, and there were many leading up to this, but the defining moment for me was when Tal had her accident.
Yeah.
And that profoundly changed my entire life, the way I think, the way I behave, what I consider important. And like you're saying, for me, I'm all about decluttering, not being so much of a consumerist, and really simplifying my life, caring about what is important to me. And it's not about things and possessions or how big my house is or not, as the case may be, but it's about the people I am with. And am I supporting them? Am I being kind to them? Am I being loving to them?
Yeah.
And that's what is strongly coming through for me. So for somebody listening who feels that they may be an empath, but they're not quite sure.
Yeah.
So how do they go about finding out if they are?
So in my personal experience, one of the sort of dead giveaways about being an empath, or that you are an empath, is that you are going through life. Everything is, like there's nothing apparently wrong. And yet you are having these, and yet suddenly you are feeling utterly out of sorts, completely disoriented, maybe you're feeling an incredible amount of fear. Maybe you're feeling an incredible amount of sadness or grief. But the feelings, the emotional experience is completely disproportionate to your reality. Now, I will say that the caveat to this is that if there is a lot of unresolved wounds and emotional baggage and trauma that you haven't dealt with, stuff you can get triggered by things that are going on and not necessarily recognize it if you have just been pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. So like if you kind of know you've had a really hard childhood or a really hard adolescence or young adulthood, and you've been kind of kicking that can down the road and suppressing it, then if you suddenly are feeling blue and out of sorts or scared or whatever intense emotion is coming up, it's entirely possible that the reason that's coming up is because the stuff that you've not dealt with is rising to the surface to be healed. So that's the caveat. If, however, you've done a lot of this work, you've been able to sit with your feelings, you've been learning how to be present with yourself, and you can scan the internal landscape and you can be like, nope. Like you're sort of taking inventory. Does it have anything to do with when I was in kindergarten and that thing happened? Does it have anything to do with my relationship with my mom or my dad or the loss of my dog or whatever it is? And everything kind of comes back. Well, yeah, maybe there's a little bit of tenderness from that, but really this is disproportionate. That's when, for me, more often than not, it means that we are picking stuff up from beyond ourselves and we are being impacted by it. Now, as I was saying before, the thing that really, in my experience, is really different about how empaths process information and people who are just psychic or intuitive do is that empaths process the information as if it's their own. Now, this is not necessarily super cut and dried because almost all empaths, in my experience, also are extremely intuitive and often very, intuitive / psychic. The challenge, though, is that when we are overwhelmed with picking up the the emotional, mental distress signals that empaths will often pick up, the problem with that is that it clouds our discernment and our ability to understand what's going on. And so a lot of times when we are in that state of what I call empathic overwhelm or empathic agitation, we feel like something's wrong and we can't put our finger on it. We can't identify what it is, what's happening, why we're feeling this way, but we just know that we are feeling disproportionately out of sorts to things. So that would be sort of my experience and in talking with a lot of people. The other thing that I would say that in my travels, I've spoken with many, many empaths. I've interviewed many, many empaths. I've had many conversations. And I can count on one hand out of the hundreds, if not thousands of empaths I've spoken to who was not told as a child that they were too sensitive, that they were overreacting, that they were taking things too personally, that they had an overactive imagination. They just needed to stop worrying about things. This is something that every so often I'll run into somebody who grew up in a family where there were people were all sensitive, and that was not the language that they were being told. But most of us who are empaths grew up in environments where the feedback we got was, you are too sensitive. So that's another way that a lot of times we can recognize ourselves as an empath. The other thing that I'll say is that I've worked with many clients over the years who, when they first came to me, they were struggling with many of the sort of quote symptoms of being an empath in terms of unexplainable feelings of blueness, anxiety, sort of confusion, doubt, low self-esteem, fear of visibility stuff, just like, all kinds of different things where they were like, my life isn't quite working the way I want it to. I want to make it better. I want to improve it. But what's been really interesting is that a lot of times as we start working into whatever is kind of what's called the presenting issue, the thing that somebody brings that's the problem that they're having, what often will happen is as we start working with it and exploring it, and as an EFT practitioner tapping on it, I would say that maybe 7 or 8 times out of 10, there is the revelation of like, oh, this is not just mine. Oh, I understand now. Like I have a person, one of my mentees had been struggling with insomnia for a long time. And it wasn't until they realized that their significant other was extremely anxious, but was also going through cognitive decline. Mm-hmm. And so they were cognitively incapable of grasping what was going on within themselves, but they were very anxious about the experience. And they were particularly anxious at night when it was sort of like it was a free-for-all with their dreaming mind. Yes. And my client, it was only after they realized, this is not my anxiety. This is not my distress. This is not like, yes, I'm worried about these circumstances, but the level of intensity and the way that this has been like, it's been dialed up to 11 on a scale of 0 to 10. This is about the person who is this is the person who's sleeping over there, who does not even have the capacity to process their own stuff anymore. And so it's just bleeding out everywhere.
So this is a really important and key thing that a lot of highly sensitive people, empaths, feel, is that they are absorbing other people's energy. And,
yes.
You can be in toxic work environments, toxic families, toxic home environments. There's a lot of toxicity out there.
Yes.
And you can be taking that all on board. So how does somebody go about protecting themselves from that?
So this is what I wrote a 380-page book about, because
let's not quite go page by page.
Yeah, we won't go page by page. And so I guess the reason I say that is because this is the $1 million question. There are a lot of different steps and a lot of different pieces to what is we need to do. What I discovered is that one of the places where we kind of need to readjust, or we need to shift things a little bit, is that instead of first going to protection, if we just start putting a bubble of light up around ourselves and trying to just protect ourselves, the problem is that we are often going to be kind of containing all the stuff we've already absorbed. And so what I discovered is that, so that's where the 5-step system for Empathic Mastery came from. What I discovered is that, and I feel like, I was in a bathroom at a conference when the 5-step system just was downloaded to me while I sat on the toilet. Like, it came through in about 30 seconds. And what I received was that before we can protect ourselves, the first step is we have to recognize. We have to recognize that we are feeling out of sorts. We have to recognize ourselves as empaths. We have to recognize that what that means is that we are more vulnerable and susceptible to picking things up from the world around us, and we need to respond or behave accordingly. So recognize is, first, we know where we come to understand what it means to be an empath. We identify as an empath. Then we recognize when we are not at our baseline, when something is feeling off, when something is feeling out of sorts, when something is feeling weird. Then we start to ask the question, and this is the piece that I always recommend, is once you notice that you're feeling out of sorts, I like to put my hands over my heart. I take in a gentle breath and I hold that breath in my heart and I just ask myself the question, is this mine? And I will say that 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, is both, or sort of yes and. There's some of it is yours, some of it is not yours. And so once I've got that answer to that, then I ask the next question, which is what's mine, what's not mine. And a lot of times what I'll discover is that maybe 10% of it is mine, coming from the angry boss that I had when I was like 27 years old. But that maybe 90% of it, or say 70% of it, is coming from the moody person that is over there. And maybe another 20% is coming from sort of this anticipation or something that has not even come to pass, but like a premonitory sense of distress. So once I start having a sense of, I'm recognizing what's mine, what's not mine, and I'm discerning kind of where all these things are coming from, then we move to the second step, which is not protect, but release. Because in order to effectively protect ourselves, we need to detox. We need to release the pain and the fear and the worry and the discomfort that we're carrying around inside of us. Because as long as we are still carrying this emotional congestion, every time we are around anything that even remotely resembles it, it's going to ping it inside of us and it's going to activate it. And then we're going to go back into that cycle. So, I've known a lot of people, especially with like very highly sensitive empathic children, they sort of teach them to put a ball of light up around themselves. And a lot of times it sort of backfires because these kids go to school, they get the ball of light up, but they're still reacting. And the reason for this is that if they are carrying emotional distress in their body, in their system, putting a bubble of light up around is not going to address the stuff that's going on in here. And the problem is, if there's stuff in here, no amount of filter and shield is going to be robust enough to not be corroded by the distress on the inside. So release is the second step of working with empathic mastery. The third step is protect. And protect has to do with both developing less permeable filters and shields, developing a stronger aura as well, and being able to really not be so susceptible to just absorbing and taking it all on and in. But it's also about the strategic boundaries of saying no. Of if, say, you've got a family member who's texting you at like 12:30 at night and they're drunk and they're in a bad mood, or if they're calling you and they're drunk and in a bad mood, it's like the boundary of saying, I'm not going to answer the phone right now. Like that we get to set a boundary and say, not my circus, not my monkey. And so protect is both about the energetic protection, but it's also about the behaviors and changing the way we engage with the world so that we are not finding ourselves susceptible to drama and situations that we can avoid. And then the fourth step is all about connect, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And I know Tal, like I can just feel Tal being like, yeah, this is where it's at. That when we fill with source, when we are connected to a power greater than ourselves, and we are bringing in that divine love and that divine light and that just yummy goodness that Tal shows you so much of all the time.
Yes.
We are so much less vulnerable to absorbing the negativity, because one of the things that I've really been coming to understand is that at this point in time, we are living in a binary reality, in the sense of we are very much still dealing with this, that, black, white, male, female, 0, 1, and that we are, and so there are two planes of existence that are existing simultaneously. There's a book that a woman named Starhawk wrote a number of years ago called The Fifth Sacred Thing, that refers to the idea of the two worlds that exist simultaneously with sort of a skim of a membrane between them of El Mundo Mal and El Mundo Bueno, sort of El Mundo Bueno being the good world and El Mundo Mal being the bad world. One of my mentors, Joanna Hunter, refers to it as source and void. And what I've been experiencing is that there's the void world, which is all about there is no afterlife. There's nothing but misery on this planet. We're all going to hell in a handbasket. And it's like it just sucks us down into the misery. And it is very convincing. It's filled with fear. It's filled with despair. It's filled with just, it's nasty. And then above it is the source, which is it's all good, mama. It's way better over here than it is here. Just wait, mama. It's going to be wonderful when you join me. You're going to love it. It's like the best ice cream sundae you've ever had. And it's this, it's that blissful, orgasmic, like beyond the beyond love that allows us to understand that even when we pass through, we leave our body, all is well in this world, all is well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well, to quote Julian of Norwich. And so the thing is that when we are not connected to the divine, when we're not connected to source, we are consistently vulnerable to falling back into the void and getting and absorbing all of the fear, the pain, and the worry of the void. But when we really make that connection to source, to the divine, till El Mundo Bueno, we can ride through the journey and ride through the process and ride through the experience in a way that, like, even the most heartbreaking experience, the loss of your daughter, you see the beautiful side of it. You receive the exquisite gift that comes with it. I mean, when my dad died, and my dad's death was anticipated, like he was 86. He had been struggling with dementia for quite a while. It was time for him to hop along. Like, he was shuffling off to Buffalo. And there was no sense of like, this is wrong. This should not have happened. We were all prepared for it. But I will say that the ecstatic, spectacular wonder that he shared with me once he crossed over was remarkable. And I had another friend who died back in 2013 who gave me a taste of it as well. And all I can say is that when we're connected to this and we can see what is possible, there is something so spectacular on the other side that is so delicious, that is so remarkable, that is so exquisite. But I do want to say that that does not mean that we don't miss the people that leave. And it does not mean that our bodies don't grieve. So I really want people to hear that I am not trying to say that if you lose somebody that you absolutely adore, you're not going to be bereft. You will. It does, our bodies are connected to each other and we feel our bodies grieve. But our spirit, our soul, can understand something so much greater than that. So connect is the fourth step. And then the fifth step is act. Because when we learn to live in a new way, we live from choice, when we live from responding instead of reacting. Life has this spectacular way of working that when we are in that kind of knotted state of emotional congestion and empathic overwhelm, we're constantly putting out fires. We're constantly just like going from one disaster to the next. It's very hard to be deliberate in our choices. And so the final step, or the fifth step of empathic mastery, is all about deliberate action, choice, consent, and being very mindful of going places where we belong and not going to the places where we do not belong.
Oh, gosh. So much to unpack in that. But what I'm going to suggest to our listeners is that definitely go grab yourself a copy of that book that you've written, Empathic Mastery, if you're wanting to delve into this anymore, because it's so rich and you're so on point, because I can see all the steps I've taken progressively through what you were describing to a point that I am now, right here and now. I do make conscious choices about how I want to respond to situations. I'm no longer reactive to life. It's like I choose.
Yes.
And I would have to say that I have been in that hot mess. I
Yes.
have been through all of those years, and I've been where it's chaos and everything. So it's taken me now, 6 years now since Tao has been over the other side. And it's been this incredible journey of awareness and understanding and peace, finding happiness, finding a reason why I'm here, and me being the director of my life. So that's what I'm going to say about that.
Yes.
I want people who are listening now to understand the reason I am talking to you is because there are so many people who are highly sensitive and emotional, who are going through grief, and who are experiencing heightened levels of fear, worry, distress, anxiety, every conceivable emotion. And I want you to understand that, yes, that is okay that you're feeling that. I want you to have an understanding and awareness of why that may be on another level that you just think is off the planet. And what I would suggest to you is just to sit in that awareness and allow yourself to be guided to taking those next steps, because you definitely can move into another place of being. And it's not always easy. And I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. And like you said earlier, Jen, you are going to miss your loved ones and how special they were to you in your life. And there's not a day I don't miss my girl. She was so much fun. She was challenging, but she was so much fun. But
so much fun. Well, and one of the things that was really incredibly powerful for me with my father, because I've had the experience of I have had many people die in my life, and I've lost many pets. But what was really wild was that the death of my father was unlike any other experience I've ever had, because it affected me energetically. And I started to experience the anticipation or the sense of my father's crossing a couple weeks before he died. And I woke up, like, it's one morning, I just woke up very early before with my waking up time. And I felt like I'd been plugged into an electrical socket. And I felt like it was the most sacred and simultaneously profane experience I'd ever had. It was like completely, like, I felt like the angels were just going to step through. And I was like, just like the portal was going to open on one side, and on the other, it felt like the most like nothing was there. It was just the most wild experience. Like, I just was sort of like, really was kind of like experiencing both source and void simultaneously. And what I realized was that when a parent dies, what that means is that half your DNA has just crossed over to the other side, and you have just become the terminal point on the chain of DNA. And there is a recalibration that happens to your energy body that is unlike anything else that you'll ever experience in your life. And I cannot imagine and the natural order of things is for the child to experience this recalibration of DNA. I don't even know what it would be like to be in the opposite position where you, who are sort of the top point, like a link drops out from beneath you. I can't even imagine that, because I have no doubt that you also had to go through this incredible recalibration. But it rocks your world. And I just think that having the willingness to have your world rocked in some ways is part of the way we get through it.
Yes, I would agree with that. And it's just like I've learned that, everything I've experienced, particularly those tough times, those struggles, have all led me to this point. And they've all had benefit and value. Even though at the time I just thought, no, gosh, I can't stand any more of this. But, in hindsight is a wonderful thing, because you can see it through a different lens. And, at various stages in my life, I became very, very grateful for what I had experienced as a youngster, because that gave me a robustness to be able to withstand what I faced later. And, depending how you choose to look at it, you can have a lot to be incredibly grateful for in the worst of experiences. So what I want to sort of just ask you now, because I know that you've had some of your beautiful pugs pass over, and that, are you highly connected with your animals as you are with your dad and other relatives?
Amazingly, sadly, they've all gone. It's been the most bizarre thing. Like one of my very first pugs who died, my pug Bodhi, oh my God, he was such an angel. He was really just so dear. And like the night after he died, I have this vivid dream. It was such a weird little dream, but I had this vivid dream that I had handed his leash over to our then president, George Bush Jr. And Bodhi was going to go take care of our president. And it was like, the message, like I had with one of my pets, we had this cat, Rumi. He came to say goodbye, like he died, and I was taking a nap, and I felt him jump up onto the bed and jump onto my body. I felt the weight of him on my body. I felt him check in with me. And he was like, thanks for the fish later. But what has been so wild is that with almost every single one of my pets, they've had other work to do. Yes. And they have not stuck around. We just lost another pet back a couple months ago. His name was Neo, his little sister. No, she's not in here, or his twin sister, Livy. Like I said, she's not in here right now. And I just, in some ways, I can kind of feel him, but amazingly, pretty much almost every one of my pets has had sort of like mission done, thanks for the fish. We got other things to do now. I'm going to go on to my next mission. And so it's been strange, because I have been able to communicate with people on the other side and with animals on the other side. But my animals generally, and maybe it's because this is like a way station for them or something, and they're getting ready to do something else. But with almost all of my animals, it's kind of been like, okay, we've got other things to do. We need to move along. So sadly, no.
Tal actually let me know that she does a lot of work with animals and connecting, people with their pets who have passed over and things like that. So she does a lot of that work, and she would be right in her element, because all she wanted, all she dreamed of here was having this little farmlet with like every conceivable animal. If she could have, she would have. And so that just made so much sense to me and fills my heart, because I know she's surrounded by everything that she loves, and she's doing what she's doing. And I think she's got used to the birds now. She said, not my favorite things when she was working with the birds, but even over there, I think you just have to suck it up at times. But yes, definitely. Yeah. What are some of your more memorable experiences with the other side?
So I'll share a story. So back in 2013, one of my dear friends died of amazingly Jakob Creutzfeldt disease, which is sort of the fancy word. It's a degenerative brain disease that only impacts about 1 million, like 1 in 1 million people. It's a very rare condition. And he died very fast. And his husband, who was an even closer friend of mine, I had gone down to their home shortly after he had passed to help with the memorial, to help do a memorial video and things like that. And I had the experience of I have never experienced more ecstatic bliss than I did in the 3-4 days that I was down visiting with them, when sort of the doors, it was like the portal was still wide open. And I came home in just this state of just wonderment. It was so exquisite. But fast forward a couple years later, I was visiting with his widower, and it was right at the anniversary of his death. And I will say that when I was down there that first time, weeks after he had died, one of the things that was just amazing was like electronics were just going off randomly. The fire alarm just kept going. Never, ever, ever in the entire time that they had lived in this house for like 8 years before had anything happened with the electronics. Never had the fire alarm gone off. The fire alarm just kept going off all the time, over and over again. Lights would just go on and off. Things like that were happening. But a couple years later, I was down right at the anniversary of his death, and his widower and I were sitting on the couch, and we were just reminiscing about him, and we were laughing about him and and I've got another story after this one, but where we were just laughing and we were just having such a wonderful time. And all of a sudden, there were 3 cats in the room with us. And all of a sudden, the cats started looking around and watching something that was not apparent to any of us. And then suddenly they looked down on the floor, and on the floor was one of those felted cat ball toys that, like, when you first get them, they're round and they're a nice hard felt ball. But after a cat's been chewing on it for a while, it kind of turns into this weird kind of oblong thing that doesn't really roll very easily. So there is this Berber carpet on the floor. And all of a sudden, we're both looking because the cats are looking. And suddenly it's as if a finger is pushing the ball across the floor. And we both look at that and we're like, and I looked at my friend and I was like, did you just see that? And he said, yeah. Did you just see that? And I was like, yeah. And so as if on cue, the ball then, like, because it had stopped, all of a sudden the ball just keeps on going. And it was like, to me, this was one of those moments where it was like, you cannot make this up. No. There was nothing. There was no air conditioner on. There was no earth. There was no trembling, no rumbling, no nothing. The cats weren't doing anything. We were watching my friend pushing this ball across the floor. I'll share one more story. about him, because that when I had gone down, there was another friend who was down there too. And what we were doing was we were spending a few days creating a memorial video that involved like a lot of music and pictures, and just we were editing this beautiful video for our friend. And we were often like cutting up and laughing, and we were ribbing our friend on the other side. I especially was like, I was teasing him relentlessly. And there was this one photograph, because he had been a middle school drama teacher, and he had a bit of like, he was really sweet, but he also had he could be a bit of a curmudgeon. And there was this one picture for that had been taken of him by one of the kids for the yearbook, where he's sort of sitting there and he's got this face, he's like looking over his glasses at the kids, like, please just hurry up and take the GD picture. Like, get over, like, just be done with this. Hold on. Sorry, my throat just decided to stop there.
No
and so problem. I was just laughing, because the picture to me was just like, it captured all of him. It just captured him so beautifully. And so I was just laughing so hard. So about an hour or so after I'd seen the picture, the phone rings, and my friend, the widower, answers the phone, and me and this other person who are there, we hear him go, okay, and about 5-10 minutes later, he comes back into the room with us, and he said, that was the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. He said, this was a woman I have not seen in years. Right before my husband died, he had been talking about this woman and saying, thinking about her and stuff like that. So she just called, because what she said was, you may not believe in any of this stuff. You may not think that this is real, but I talk to dead people, and your husband is here because he wants you to know that he's been trying to get in touch with you, and you're, but he's been having a hard time getting through to you. Because unfortunately, in my experience, grief will block our ability to receive messages. Yes. And I had been transmitting messages, but he was so aggrieved that anything I said that was coming through from our friend was just being like, yeah, sure. You're just saying that. So basically what this woman said was, your husband wants you to know that he is really happy, that you are so happy, that you are hanging out with friends, that you guys are having such a good time, that you are laughing, that you are enjoying yourself, and that, that you seem like you're really okay. And he wants you to know he sees you, he's right there with you, and that he's really loving the conversation that the three of you are having right now. Now, the thing is, this woman had not had anything to do with these two people for 4 years. They had had nothing to do with each other. There was nothing that was even indicating that any of us, that me and this other person were visiting there. And there was no indication whatsoever that we would all be hanging out and laughing hysterically. Nobody in their right mind would think that a person grieving the loss of their husband a week and a half, 2 weeks later would be in stitches laughing. Yes. So for this woman to be talking about exactly what was happening in a way that she could not possibly have known was just absolute, pure confirmation that there is more to this earth than is dreamt of in our philosophy. And for me, I had always known about this stuff. I had always believed in this stuff. I had always had a connection to this stuff. But the cat ball rolling across the floor and that phone call were the two experiences that I have had that basically solidified the deal for me and made me go, yeah, this shit is real. This is real.
Yes. Yeah. I had a profound experience too, where I changed the photograph on my phone to one that my daughter obviously did not want on my phone as the main photo. And so when I woke up in the morning, it was changed.
I went, you little minx. That's my phone. But she's going, well, if you can do what I can do, So yeah, it is. It's a strange mix, isn't it? It's beautiful. It's sad. It's hopeful. It's so much you experience, and I think it's now a good time to just wind down on our conversation together, because I know we could just keep chatting.
You and I could talk for hours and hours. I have no doubt, Helen.
Yeah. So I just would like to finish up with a couple of questions for you. The first is, what's the best thing that's happened to you today?
Today?
Yeah.
I have had, so this is the second podcast conversation I've had. I interviewed somebody before you and I jumped on, and I had this spectacular conversation about generosity and connection with this wonderful woman first. And I will say, this conversation with you and I, getting to meet Tal, I can feel her so strongly. She is, the words that come to my mind, she's like a matchmaker. Like she just is like, she makes things happen. She is just remarkable. It's a pleasure it's really a delight to meet her. So I would say the highlight, and also the weather today here in Maine. I live in the tippy top northeast corner of the United States. And ordinarily, like, the weather here would be like at this time of year, maybe about 15 Celsius, or, I think, which is about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, the weather was 80 degrees, which is more like, I think, about 25 Celsius.
Oh, lovely.
It was so beautiful. The weather is the sun is out, the flowers are starting to bloom. Everything is beautiful. And the best thing that has happened today is that I have really been in source. I've been in El Mundo Bueno all day.
I love it.
And it's been just a beautiful, beautiful day.
What more can I say to that? What are you most grateful for?
The immediate answer that comes to my mind is actually I'm most grateful for my gratitude.
Great, yes. Oh, that's a game changer. That is a life changer.
It is a game changer. Everything, it's like life with gratitude is so much easier. Life with want is just so miserable. So I am just so grateful for my gratitude. I'm so grateful for every single time that I can be in a state of appreciation and delight and wonderment. And I am also most grateful when I am in source and not staring down into the void worrying.
Yeah. Oh, that is so incredible. I connect with that so much. And whenever I'm out of sync, that's what I go to, gratitude. Yeah. It always puts me back on the right path again.
Exactly.
When you have moments in your day where you are perhaps in the void and things are turning to custard a wee bit, what's your go-to to pivot yourself back out of that?
So there's a couple different things that seem to work. One is just to go outside, to stand on the earth, feel my connection to the earth, look up at the sky, and remember how insignificant I really am. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all, but to just really get perspective about my size in the grand scheme of things, to really get back to knowing I am a cell in the body of this earth. And all of these human problems and these human worries are just like, they're stupid. Breathing also helps. Using flower essences like Bach flower remedies, other remedies that I work with also helps. Tapping EFT will really, really help to shift helps to shift focusing on or going through a gratitude alphabet. If I'm really in a funk and I need to go through and just A, I'm grateful for, appreciation. B, I'm grateful for, balls, C, I'm grateful for computers. I'm just going through that. And then the other other thing that, interestingly, when I'm really out of sorts sometimes and I just need a reboot, decluttering, like going and just grabbing a box or
Oh,
grabbing a thing
yes.
and just going and like sorting through the stuff, folding laundry, like just getting back, doing the dishes, like getting back into the physical, menial, just like
Yes.
let's put things to right. Let's just bring things back, like let's just straighten things up. And
Yeah.
so often, like that will help me to shift.
Oh, those are wonderful suggestions. All right. So we're going to have all the links in the episode notes so that we can share those with our listeners if they're wanting to connect with you or grab a copy of your book and that. But what would you like to leave our listeners with? And I think you might also have something special for them as well.
Yes. Well, if somebody wants to jump on over to, so I'll just say that if you want to find the whole shooting match, it's over at empathicmastery.com. And if you want the book, it's empathicmasterybook.com. If you want to listen to my podcast where I interview empaths and talk about the experience of being highly sensitive and empathic, that is empathicmasteryshow.com. And if you want to get basically a guide that really starts giving you tools for navigating your sensitivity, go on over to empathicsensitivity.com. So in terms of just one, I keep thinking of this one thing that I want to say is that I've been thinking a lot because I was anticipating this conversation and I was thinking about, for me, grief is not hard when I let myself feel it. Resistance to grief is hard. And what it does is it creates anxiety. And what I've noticed is that I experience like when I worry about all the things that could come to pass, it's because I'm not giving myself permission to grieve. And I actually really believe, and something that came through me a number of years ago now, probably 20 or 30 years ago now, is when in doubt, grieve. I really believe that grief is the thing we avoid the most. And yet when we let ourselves grieve, it moves very quickly and it has a way of just transforming ourselves. And this also goes back to the idea of decluttering, because I actually believe that clutter is unreconciled grief. If we keep things because we cannot let go. And if we let ourselves grieve, we will not need to keep those things. So when in doubt, grieve.
Oh, that's very, very powerful. And I was just thinking of all those people that are sitting there listening that may be living in a cluttered environment. And so, yeah, that would have been powerful for them too, to realize that actually it's all about letting go, allowing yourself to be and however you need to be, whatever state you're in is perfect for you to be in at that time. And I'm a great believer in that, and sometimes grief is ugly and that's perfectly okay. Often it's ugly.
Yeah. It's snotty and messy and
loud
awful. And sometimes it's like, I am not ready to let go of this blanket. I am not ready to let go of this piece of jewelry. I am not ready, but making that deliberate choice and saying, I am not ready to let this go now. This is the this is the object, this is the continuity, or this is the thing that helps me to stay connected. So,
yeah, great. Yeah. Jennifer, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to have spent this time with you today to discuss, highly sensitive people, empaths, the whole spectrum, to enable people who may not have realized that to get an understanding of, yes, in fact, they might be an empath, and yes, that in fact might be influencing their grief greatly. And then also sharing your stories with your own experiences of those who have passed. It's just been a great pleasure, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, Helen, this has been Helen and Tal, because I feel her. She's like, acknowledge me. you can. It's like, I'm here, so don't forget me. thank you so much for having me. This really, really has been divine.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. Let me know how I'm doing, or if there's a topic you'd like covered, by clicking on the Healing to Be You Gmail link or going to the Healing to Be You website. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button and please share if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode. Until next time, be kind to you and take good care.